Hello students, so today we are going to talk about Unit 2.1 and Unit 2.2 of Creative Writing. Unit 2.1 is sketching the plot, conflict, climax, resolution and action, and Unit 2.2 is about description, point of view, dialogue and setting an atmosphere. These are all parts of creative writing aspect. If you remember from our previous classes, we had discussed about how to tap the ways of creative writing. We had also discussed about the different types of creative writing like fiction, non-fiction, even writing a factual piece. How can you be creative in that? We had discussed everything about that. So today we are going to go into a little bit more details, and we're going to look into how you can actually start writing creative. So in case if you have been practicing creative writing, it will help you develop that skill in a better way. So we'll be first discussing about plot and structure. I'm pretty sure all of you must have heard about something called plot. Like when you watch a movie, somebody would tell you, a friend will tell you that the plot of this movie was good. Somebody would tell the plot of the movie was not good. And also somebody would tell you, just look at how the movie ended. It was not right. Somebody would tell you, yes, the ending was good. So all these caters to plot and structure of a writing piece. Now, as we had discussed for even a movie or a series that you are watching on Netflix, on Amazon Prime, everything happens depending on a plot. So if we are talking about a plot, when a plot is like the gravity, and it's like essential, structure is essential. They are like the gravity that pulls the entire storyline together. So you cannot really ignore a plot and go ahead and shoot a film or just sell something. So what would be a story plot? Now the very basic definition of a plot would be: plot is the series of events that make up your story, including the order in which they occur and how they relate to each other. Now structure, as you know, is basically narrative structure. That is how your story is narrated, is basically the overall design or layout of your story. Okay, now while plot is very specific to your story, like say if you are writing a tragedy or if you are writing a comedy, it has to be specific, because plot cannot plot will vary from story to story. It cannot be same, otherwise it will be a copyright, it will be a plagiarism. So plot is specific to your story and the particular events that make up the story, but structure is much more abstract and it deals with the mechanics of the story, how the chapters, the scenes are broken up. Now when it comes to structure, different fiction or stories can have different similar structure, like it has a introduction, it has a middle, it has a end. But then when it comes to the plot, that is how the structure changes. So plot is different from each other, and plot determines the structure as well. Okay, how the chapters or the scenes are broken, what is the conflict, what is the climax, what is the resolution, everything is a part of the the structure of a creative writing. So you can actually think of plot and structure like the DNA of your story. DNA, as you know, it's essential for anything and everything to have a DNA. Now every story takes on a plot, and every piece of writing has a structure where plot is perhaps unique to your story. You can use an understanding of common structures and devices to develop the better stories and hone your craft. Okay, now the essential narrative devices for plot and structure, we are going to just the plot and structure, but you should also know what are the essential elements of plot and structure. So when it comes to the essentials of narrative devices for plot and structure, there are three common devices essential to fiction. Basically fiction and creative writing, that helps you to write a novel that will help frame any current story that you're working on and give you a jumping off point to learn more about plot and structure. Okay, so the first would be 3-act structure, as you can see on my screen. This idea goes back to the ancient giant, very dramatic structure theory, and it's the best time tested one. Now there was a philosopher by the name of Aristotle who said that every story has a beginning, a middle and an end, and ancient Greek plays often follow this very sticky but very quick formula structure by 3 acts, and these are used in screenwriting and novels today. The 3-act structure is as basic as you can get. Every story ever written has a beginning, a middle and an end. Okay, next would be the narrative arc, and it is also called Freytag's pyramid. The narrative arc is made up of the following pieces. Number 1 would be exposition, second would be rising action, third would be climax, fourth will be falling action, and finally it will be resolution. So for your information, I'm going to give you the definition of all these 5 pieces of Freytag's pyramid. The first one is exposition, that is the opening of the story, how the story ends. It includes a reader's introduction to the characters and the setting. Second, the rising action is basically a series of events that complicates the matters of your character and results in increased drama and suspense. Finally, the climax, the big showdown where your characters encounter their opposition, and that is, they either win or they lose. Next would be the falling action, a series of events that unfold after the climax and lead to the end of the story. And finally, the resolution, the end of the story, in which problems are resolved or not resolved depending on the story, and called the denouement, the catastrophe, or the revelation. Okay. Now, talking about the next part of what is the climax, that is but before that we will discuss a little bit more about climax, that is how climax fits into the dramatic structure. So we are going to talk about how climax fixes into it. Climax is the second last element of the dramatic structure. The dramatic structure, as we teach, it consists of 6 elements, that is the exposition, the inciting incident, rising action, that is also the progressive element, crisis, and denouement. Okay. Now basically a climax is just one scene. It should not be very long, so that a reader may get bored. So it should be basically one scene or 1 or 2 pages long, so that that attraction is held on and you do not lose an interest out of it. So when it comes to structure, climax, one thing to note is that stories have more than one climax. In fact, every act, every scene should have their own climax. And of course there will be more than one core climax, the big moment the story turns on and leads up to, but the smaller climaxes in each scene and act continue to create drama and keep the story moving along with its value scale. So one of the most important ones beside the story's core climax is the climax's subplots. Subplots are shorter plots within the larger plot of the story, and like all plots they contain climaxes. So where does the subplot climax occur in a story? The best place for the subplot climax to fit is the denouement, the final scene or the scenes in a story. That is why frequently a story in or any particular love story, a subplot will end in a final professing of love for each other, or for the love interest, beginning the completion of the subplot. Now it is very important to pay attention to both the core climax and also the climax of your subplot. Now Freytag's, what if Freytag's pyramid that we just discussed gets wrong? So one of the most popular and perhaps the most widely taught method of understanding story structure, what most people don't know, even those who advise, or those who talk about Freytag's pyramid, is that the originator had a very different understanding of climax than most professional writers do today, and even a wrong understanding will lead to a different different structure altogether of the climax. So where he puts the climax and what the climax is very, very important to a writer, and very importantly when the reader reads it, the reader should understand where is the climax. So for Freytag, the climax was always in the center of a story, not towards the end. So most writers today would put the climax much later in the story, while writers today would consider the climax of most stories near the end of the plot. For Freytag, it's the center, but that's not the only difference. The second difference is how Freytag defines the climax. Now Freytag's climax is much different from what we would think of climax today. That is because Freytag was particularly interested in single story arc, what we call the Icarus. So Icarus, as you know, the story of Icarus is when the moment you go high up, something happens and you are not being able to finish it. Okay, it is marked by the protagonist's rising fortunes through first half of the story, followed by a turning point, and then the protagonist's falling fortunes and an ending act or lower than where they were at the start of the story. Also notice how very closely the Icarus structure mirrors Freytag's pyramid. This isn't a coincidence, as this was the plot type Gustav Freytag was more interested in. So the plot he considered the apex of literature. For Freytag, the climax of the plot was the peak of the pyramid, the moment when the characters' fortunes reverse. Today no one would call the climax of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare as something that is bad. Instead, more writers would consider that the midpoint, calling the scene in which Romeo and Juliet commit suicide, as the climax. So climax examples, there are many. If you read lots of novel, you will be able to understand, and also you should be able to focus on it. Now there are have 4 tips to write a great climax. First of all, you should focus on your story's value and not just more conflict or action. You should the plot means what they need, so you should make sure that you are giving a lot of importance to the plot. The internal climax makes possible the external climax, so you have to make sure there is an internal climax happening in the subplot to make the reader ready for a final climax. And your climax, if it's not working, then try to find out what is the cause rather than pushing the climax towards this final and stretching it so much that the climax of your plot has finally lost its own value. So moving on, we'll move to subunit 2.2. In subunit 2.2, we are going to discuss about the action, the description, the point of view, the dialogue, the setting and the atmosphere that is required in a storyline. So when we talk of action, as you know, before we discuss about action, let us talk about what is fiction. Fiction, as you know, is make-believe. These are invented stories. They may be short stories, fables, Wagner's plays, novellas or novels. Now, although writers may have a base of a character on people they have met in real life, the characters and the experiences that the character faces in the story are not real. Okay, so how does a writer write fiction? Characters, setting, plot, conflict, point of view and theme are the 6 elements of writing fiction. Now, characters are the people. They are the animals or aliens in the story. Readers come to know the characters and what they say, what they think and how they act. E.M. Forster, who was an English novelist, identified the characters as either flat or round. Flat characters do not play important roles in the stories. They often have only 1 or 2 traits with little description about them. A flat character may even be a stock character, which is a stereotypical figure that is easily recognized by the readers, for example, the mad scientist or the evil stepmother. On the other hand, the round character play a very important role. Often the lead roles go in the story. They are the complex, dimensional, well-developed. The stories are about them, therefore the pages of writing will be about them. They often change by going through a life-changing experience as the story unfolds. Now, while discussing stories with other readers and writers, or when the writing an essential part of a story, fictional characters can be described as static or developing. Now, static means the characters stay the same throughout the story, they do not change. Developing also means dynamic, means the character changes. The change may impact the reader's belief, the attitudes or the actions. The change may be small or large. This change occurs because the character experiences an epiphany and an insight about the life. So if the readers write about characters outside their own culture, they need to do research so as not to misrepresent a particular culture. The same is also true of characters who have illnesses. The writer may need to research the illness and treatment for it in order to be accurate about it. Moving on, we have the setting. The setting is basically where and when the story takes place. It includes the following: the immediate surrounding of the characters, such as props in a storyline, the trees, food inside of a house, car, etc. The time of a day, such as morning, afternoon, night. The weather, such as cloudy, sunny, windy, snow or rain, etc. The time of the year, particularly the seasons, the fall, winter, summer, spring. The geographical locations, including the city, state, country, possibly the universe if the writing is a writing scene fiction. Setting can function as a main force that the characters encounter, such as tornado or flood, or a setting can play a minor role, such as setting the mood. Often the time the setting can reveal something about the main character, that he or she functions in that place. Writers write about places they are familiar with. If they aren't familiar with the place, then they need to research it in order to be accurate about the place. Now, plot is in the the order of events in the story. The plot usually follows a very particular accurate called the Freyta experiment that we just discussed. Freyta experiment has 5 parts. We also discussed that: like exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement. Now, exposition is an introduction to the characters, time, or problem. At that point where exposition moves into rising action, a problem, sometimes called an inciting incident, occurs for the main characters to handle or solve. This creates a beginning of the story. Rising action includes the events that the main character encounters. Each event developed in separate scenes make the problem more complex. Climax is the turning point in the story. Usually it is single event with the greatest intensity or uncertainty. The main characters contend with the problem at this point. Falling action includes the events that unfold the climax. This usually creates an emotional response from the reader. Denouement or resolution provides closure to the story, ties up the loose ends. Conflict is the struggle between two entities. In story writing, the main character, also known as protagonist, encounters a conflict with the antagonist, which is the adversary. Point of view is the stories that are generally told in two points of views. First person narratives, third person narrative. First person point of view means that one of the stories in the story will narrate, give an account of the story. The narrator may be the protagonist, the main character. Writing in the first person point of view brings the reader closer to the story. Okay, the third person limited means that the narrator limits himself or herself by being able to be in the character's thought, whereas the first and third person narrative, writing in third person points of view, removes readers from the story because of the pronouns. The theme is not the plot of the story, it is the underlying truth that is being conveyed in the story. Themes can be universal, meaning they are understood by readers no matter what culture or country the readers is. Common themes include coming of age, circle of life, prejudice, good, evil, beating, etc. all. So this was all about the most of the elements in creative writing today. I hope you all have enjoyed the class. Hope you all have understood very importantly what is Freytag's pyramid, because when it comes to doing creative writing, let us not just write anything that comes to our mind. Let us follow certain rules, because all the rules are to make you understand how creative writing can be improved, how creative writing is an essential element of it. So with that, we'll be closing our today's discussion. Hope you all will go through it again, hear the recording again. If you have doubts, make notes, but again practice writing. Whatever comes to your mind, put it into paper, jot it down. It will always help you to write better. Take a stock of words, make more, it will increase your vocabulary, and it will certainly help you to write better. Thank you all for joining today's session. Thank you.